Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, students. Welcome back to lecture number 23rd of macroeconomic course. पहले की तरह चंद मिनट के लिए हम will talk about the previous lecture, okay, what we have learned in the previous class, और उसके बाद आज के लेक्चर की बात हम करेंगे. As you know that हमने पिछले लेक्चर में we have completed the discussion about consumption function, and we talked about the four different hypotheses, four different point of views given by different economists about the consumption and income relationship. First we talked about the Modigliani life cycle hypothesis. He said that according to Modigliani, who did research in 1950s along with his other colleagues, and he said that income varies systematically over time, right? So consumption depends on income, which is earned by the individual, by the consumer, by the household over the lifetime, right? So that's why he called it life cycle hypothesis, because consumption varies systematically over time. He also said that consumers smooth their consumptions by using savings and borrowing, right? So when in good time, when their income is greater than consumption, they save and they use that saving. They use their saving when their income is low as compared to consumption. Similarly, they also said that consumers smooth their consumptions, optimal their consumptions by using borrowing also when their income is low as compared to consumption. Consumption, he also said that consumption depends on two components, two things. One is the income that is being earned by the individual, by the consumer in throughout lifetime, and then also depend करती है the wealth, initial wealth of the consumer. So this was the first model जिसकी हमने बात की, and this Modigliani life cycle hypothesis also helps. The implication of the model was it helps to resolve the consumption function or consumption puzzle. Now consumption puzzle क्या थी? Keynes ने ये कहा कि in consumption depend on current income. Now APC falls as income rises. APC rises as income falls. But Simon Kuznets, who criticized this, he said that APC remains stable if we talk about long time series data. If we talk about long term, then APC does not change, does not fall, it remains stable as income rises. So that was the consumption puzzle. So that hypothesis given by Modigliani also helped to solve that puzzle. So this was the first model that we have discussed in the last class, and that talked about consumption, how consumption and income is related, and how income is measured by the earned by the individual or consumer in lifetime. Second जो model जिसकी हमने बात की, we talked about the Friedman permanent income hypothesis, and that is according to him, consumption depends on permanent income, right? YP. So income has two components, permanent income and transitory income. So एक और नाम भी इन्होंने दिया, they can say that you can call permanent income as the average income, and transitory income is the income which when the income is deviated or the deviation from permanent income, so that is known as the transitory income. Consumer, again, he also said that consumer uses their savings and borrowing to smooth their consumption, right? In the face of whenever there is change in the transitory income or change in the income of the consumer, so they use borrowings and savings. Third, जिस मॉडल की हमने बात की, we talked about the random walk hypothesis given by Robert Hall. He said that if we combine PIH, permanent income hypothesis, with rational expectations, so he introduced the concept of rational expectation. He said that Fisher believes that permanent hypothesis believes that consumers are forward-looking. Now, if consumers are forward-looking, and if we combine them with the rational expectation, and if we believe that consumers are rational, or they behave rationally, so then changes in consumption are unpredictable. You can't predict changes in consumption because it occurs only when there is unanticipated change in permanent income of the consumer, right? So then that concept is known as the random walk hypothesis, that there is a random change in consumption, right, which is not as anticipated because it depends on the unanticipated, unpredicted changes in permanent income, right? So when you can't predict, when you can't anticipate the changes in permanent income, then of course you can't predict, you can't forecast, anticipate the changes in permanent, the changes in consumption. So changes in consumption are anticipated. That is the main result. It is just random walk, it is just random change in consumption. Lastly, जिसकी हमने बात की, we talked about Labson and pull of instant gratification concept की बात की. He uses psychology to understand consumer behavior. He said that the desire of instant gratification causes people to save less than they rationally know they should save, right? So normally they save less because they want to satisfy their desire instantly, satisfactions, right? So they save less as compared to when they save as a rational consumer, as a rational individual. So this was all about the previous class. So we concluded with the consumption chapter. Now we'll start a new concept today, a new topic today, that is about the debt. How we define government debt, what is the government debt, right? And then how we cope up with that debt, what are the policy recommendations, what are the policies to analyze debt, government debt, and we'll compare the debt of different countries. What we are going to learn that in 2 days, we'll see how much is the size of US debt and how it compares to other countries. This is the first thing that we are going to see. That first part will compare the US debt, government debt, with the other countries' debt. We'll try to compare the government debt of different countries and see how countries behave, how countries' debt goes on. So that can be done only if we compare the debt figures of different countries. So that is the first part of today's class. Second part, we'll discuss the problems measuring the budget deficit. So what are the issues, what are the problems that are basically there in order to measure the exact budget deficit, because you know budget deficit is not exactly measured, exactly counted because of those problems. So we'll discuss those problems. So there are 4 problems basically that we are going to highlight in today's class, and that because of those problems deficit is not properly measured. So this is the second thing जिस पे आज हम बात करेंगे. Third cheese, we'll talk about the traditional view and the Ricardian views of the government debt. How traditional economists views that, how the Ricardians group of economists views the government debt. तो दोनों views को देखेंगे, compare करेंगे कि what they say about government debts, what they say about budget deficit. तो तीसरी चीज़ जो है इस पे आज हम बात करेंगे. And finally, and we'll see some other perspective about the debt. So what are the other perspective, what the other people, what other economists says about the government debt. तो ये 4 चीज़ें हैं जिन पे आज हम बात करेंगे. Now first we talk about we start with the first part. We'll see that and compare how we can analyze the debt of different governments, different countries. If you look in this table tells us the indebtedness of the world's governments, what is the percentage of debt of different countries. So you can start from Japan. It is 119, so the highest debt government of Japan, which is 119% of GDP. Italy 108, Belgium 105, Canada 101, Greece 100, Denmark 67, UK 64, USA 62% of GDP. फ्रांस की बात करें तो 58%, Portugal 55, Ireland 54, Spain 53, Finland 51, Sweden 49% of GDP. If we talk about Germany, 46%, Austria, if we talk about Austria, it's 40%. If we talk about Netherlands, 27% of GDP they have debt. Austria ki baat kare 26, and the lowest one is the Norway. So Norway has only 24% of debt of their GDP, right? So what this table basically tells us that US as compared to other country has a moderate level of debt as a percentage of GDP. So please remember, so in this lecture में most of the time we'll be comparing US economy, US government with other economy or other countries economies. Now you can see these figures in this table. Also this tells so different time period and what was the status of debt in different time periods in the US economy. There was a revolutionary war, जब high था उसके बाद कम हुआ. Then in case of civil war in 1871 it again goes up to 0.4. If we talk about then war 1 उसमें भी कुछ इजाफा हुआ. World War 2 में देखें it goes up to maybe more than 1%, and then it goes down and coming down in 2001. So in different years, because of different possibilities, different scenarios, different economic circumstances, so it has a different value. Now US experience in recent years. So what is the recent experience of US government in case of debt? In early 1980s through early 90s, debt GDP ratio rose from 25.5% in 1982, 48.9% in 1993, right? So US debt increases from 25.5% in 1982, 48.9% in 1993 due to Reagan tax cut, Reagan reform, fiscal reforms. That was because they cut in taxes, increases defense spending. जब उनमें taxes में कमी वाक़ई हुई, दूसरी तरफ से defense expenditure में इजाफा हो गया और entitlement में इजाफा हो गया, तो what will happen? Budget deficit में इजाफा हो गया, and as we know that in the long run budget deficits accumulates the government debt. So due to the tax cut, increases in spending and entitlements lead to increase in US deficit and increase in government debt. In early 90s through 2000, if we talk about the budget, the deficit was $290 billion in 1992. That came down from $290 billion to $236 billion surplus in 2001, right? So when there was a surplus in budget deficit, that helps to reduce the government debt burden in those years, right? Because that surplus in budget was used or can be used to finance the deficit or to finance the government debt of the previous years. Now debt GDP ratio fell due to that surplus in budget deficit. Debt GDP ratio fell from 32% in 2000 to 32.5% in 2000, from 48.9%. Due to rapid growth, stock market boom, tax hike in 2001, and that was why that GDP ratio comes down in US economy and US government from 48 to 32%, and that was because of the rapid economic growth in those particular years. And there was a boom in the stock market, there was tax hikes in 2001, and so the return of deficit due to Bush tax cut and economic slowdown. But again, after 2001, there was a return of deficit. So again budget, हमने देखा कि जब budget surplus हुआ तो उससे GDP debt ratio में कमी वाक़ई हुई, and that was mainly due to rapid economic growth and growth in stock market and as well as tax hikes in 2001. But after that, what happened? Again जो budget deficit हो गया, budget deficit return हो गया, and due to budget deficit in after 2001, when Bush administration tax cut, they reduces taxes. जब taxes में उन्होंने कमी वाक़या की तो there was an economic slowdown also in the country. Now if you see that there was economic slowdown, तो in that case again deficit ज़्यादा हो गया और उससे government debt में इजाफा होना शुरू हो गया. Now if we want to see the fiscal future, the policy future of the fiscal policy in US, if you look at this on y-axis in this graph, we are measuring percentage of US population. On x-axis we're measuring years, and these bar charts are basically those for those people whose age is 60 and up. Now the aging population, what is the aim or the objective of this graph? I want to show you that the aging population, which is 60 and above, 65 and above, and because of lower birth rates, increased life expectancy, and retirement of baby boomers. So because of these factors, these are the main some of the causes of increase in budget deficit and causes of increase in government debt of US economy. Now the number of people receiving social security, उनमें इजाफा हो गया. The people who are receiving medical care, उनमें इजाफा हो गया. Then the number of working paying taxes. So what happens? So due to increase in the number of people who receive social security, the number of people who receive Medicare, then the number of people who are working, जब उनमें इजाफा हुआ तो क्या हुआ? अखराजात में इजाफा हो गया. एक तरफ अखराजात में इजाफा हो गया यूएस गवर्नमेंट के आफ्टर 2001, दूसरी तरफ से उसकी जो टैक्स कट हुआ, टैक्स कट की वजह से इनकम में कमी वाक़ई होगी. जब इनकम में कमी हुई, अखराजात में इजाफा हुआ तो बजट डेफिसिट हो गया, एंड दैट बजट डेफिसिट लीड टू इंक्रीज इन debt GDP ratio in US economy. So after that, if we talk about some of the projections, and that is by the congressional budget, and they have official projections about the debt GDP ratio of US economy. क्या projections हैं? They project that 2030 तक by 2030 debt GDP ratio in US economy will be 40%. In 2040 they are projecting that that ratio will go up from 40 to 93%. That's very heavy. And then if we talk about 250, the projection which they are for 250, that GDP ratio will go up to 106%. Pretty high, right? So we discussed in the first part, so what is the state of affair of US government, what is the level of deficit there, what is the level of debt GDP ratio in US economy, what are the projections for debt GDP ratio for the coming 30-40 years in US economy. Now we'll discuss the problems which basically we are facing in measuring deficit. How we can say that deficit is not actually measured or properly measured, and that is because of the certain problems, certain reasons why it is not being measured properly. Now there are 4 problems associated with this measurement issue. That is because of that we can say that उसकी वजह से हम ये कह सकते हैं कि जो deficit है properly measure नहीं किया जा रहा. And what are those issues? What are those problems which are the cause of measurement of deficit? Is one of the problem is inflation, the other is capital assets, the third is uncounted liabilities, and the fourth issue or the problem in measurement of deficit is the business cycle. We'll discuss these problem one by one, इनको एक एक करके हम डिटेल में डिस्कस करते हैं और एनालाइज करते हैं और देखते हैं कि किस तरह से जो चार इश्यूज हैं, जो चार प्रॉब्लम हैं जिनकी हमने बात की कि दे कैन बिकम द रीजंस और कॉजेज ऑफ मेजरमेंट इश्यूज इन बजट डेफिसिट। फर्स्ट प्रॉब्लम क्या हमने हाईलाइट किया कि कौन सा प्रॉब्लम है जिसकी वजह से जो डेफिसिट है उसको सही तरीके से मेजर नहीं किया जा सकता। व्हाट इज द फर्स्ट प्रॉब्लम? द फर्स्ट प्रॉब्लम इज दैट inflation. To see, we are going to see here why inflation is a problem, why raising prices and general price level is a problem in measurement of deficit. Suppose to see that, we suppose that the real debt is constant, which implies zero real deficit. So for analyzing this problem, if we assume that, if we suppose that the real debt is constant, which implies that the real zero real deficit in the economy. Now in this case, nominal debt, which is denoted by D, grows at the rate of inflation. So we can say that the nominal debt, जब हमने ये कहा, जब हमने ये assume किया कि जो real debt है is given is constant, which implies the zero real deficit. So because of this assumption, we can say that and the nominal debt, which is denoted by D, grows at the rate of inflation. So as inflation grows, nominal debt will also grow. They grow at the same rate. So delta D over D is the growth or the change in the nominal debt, and which that growth or the change in nominal debt is equal to the growth rate of inflation or the rate of inflation in the country and the economy. Or we can rewrite this equation as change in debt is equal to inflation into debt. So change in debt is proportional to change in the inflation rate, right? So the reported deficit, which is nominal, is pi D. So the deficit which is reported by the government is pi D, even though the real deficit is zero, right? So if we multiply inflation with the level of debt, we can find the nominal deficit in the country and the economy, right? So as you know that ऊपर हमने अभी assume किया है कि real deficit zero है. Even if real deficit is zero, there is some level of nominal deficit, and that deficit is equal to pi D, which is pi is the inflation rate in the country. If you multiply inflation with the debt of the economy, you will get the nominal deficit in the country and the economy. Hence, should subtract pi D from the reported deficit to correct for inflation. So we need to subtract pi D from the reported deficit. जो deficit report हो रहा है उसमें से अगर आप pi D निकाल दें in order to correct this deficit for inflation, right? तो ये आपको उसमें से निकालना पड़ेगा, उसमें से निकालेंगे, so that will correct the deficit of the economy, right? तो हम ये कह सकते हैं कि inflation जो है ये एक प्रॉब्लम है, ये एक इशू है इन द मेजरमेंट ऑफ डेफिसिट, राइट? अगर हम इसको प्रॉपर्ली टेक केयर नहीं करेंगे, इसको प्रॉपर्ली उसको मॉनिटर नहीं करेंगे, देखेंगे नहीं जब डेफिसिट निकाल रहे हो, तो दिस कुड बी ए प्रॉब्लम, दिस कुड बी एन इशू in measuring the deficit in the country and the economy. Now, correcting the deficit for inflation can make huge difference, especially when inflation is high, right? So jab aap, when you're using inflation to correct the deficit in the country, so this will make a big difference, this will make a huge difference, especially when the inflation is high. That is very important. For example, in 1979, Nominal deficit in US economy was 28 billion US dollar. Inflation rate in that particular time was 8.6%. Debt at that time was 495 billion US dollar. Now pi d, which is the corrected inflation for debt, is for deficit, is 0.806 into 495 is equal to 43 billion US dollar. So then real deficit kya hoga? 28 billion, which was the nominal deficit, and the debt, the deficit corrected for inflation, nominal debt corrected for inflation is 43 billion. दोनों को अगर subtract कर ले तो 15 billion US dollar is the surplus, right? You can see that from this example how inflation is important to be accounted for when deficit is being measured, right? Whether you're measuring nominal deficit or real deficit, you need to account, because in real deficit inflation is already adjusted in the deficit, but when we are measuring nominal deficit, you need to keep in mind that deficit must be, inflation must be considered or accounted in measuring the nominal deficit. So inflation एक ऐसा मसला है, एक ऐसा प्रॉब्लम है जिसकी वजह से इकोनॉमीज जो हैं, कंट्रीज जो हैं, अपना जो डेफिसिट है सही तरीके से मेजर नहीं कर पाते. सेकंड जो इशू है, सेकंड जो प्रॉब्लम है जिसकी वजह से इन्फ्लेशन को सही, डेफिसिट को सही मेजर नहीं किया जा सकता, दैट इज द कैपिटल एसेट, द कैपिटल बजटिंग. करंटली deficit is equal to change in debt, right? So how deficit is measured? That is the change in debt over time. So that tells us the deficit in the economy. But capital budgeting, according to capital budgeting, deficit is equal to change in debt minus change in assets. So currently what we are doing in this chapter, or what we are studying, what we are analyzing, that deficit is equal to change in debt over time. जैसे कि हमने definition में ये बताइए कि deficit को change debt को कैसे मेजर करते हैं, over the time जो deficit में तब्दीली आती है, debt में तब्दीली आती है, that is known as the deficit of the economy, or deficit in budget. But capital budgeting says that deficit is equal to change in debt minus change in assets. So you should include the change in asset if while calculating deficit by capital budgeting. Now suppose, for example, government sells the office building and uses the proceeds to pay down the debt. अगर गवर्नमेंट ऑफिस बिल्डिंग बेच देती है और उससे जो पैसे आते हैं उनको डेट पे करती है, तो व्हाट विल हैपन अंडर द करंट सिस्टम, जिसमें हम ये कह रहे हैं कि डेट डेफिसिट इज इक्वल टू चेंजेस इन डेट. Under the current system, deficit would fall. Under the capital budgeting, deficit will remain unchanged because fall in debt is offset by a fall in assets, right? तो capital budgeting की जब आप बात करेंगे तो वो उसके हिसाब से deficit unchanged रहेगा, same रहेगा, because the fall in debt जो कर्जे में कमी वाक़या हुई उस is offset by a fall in assets, right? So problem with capital budgeting is determining which government expenditure counted as a capital expenditure, which government expenditure are counted as a capital expenditure. So capital assets is very, very important instrument, important parameter that needs to be discussed, that needs to be considered कि जब आप डेफिसिट मेजर कर रहे हो तो कैपिटल एसेट्स का भी ख्याल करना चाहिए कि उसमें क्या कमी वाक़या हुई या उसमें इजाफा हुआ. Whenever there is change in debt, of course जो कैपिटल एसेट्स हैं उसमें भी कमी बेशी होती रहती है. तो जैसा कि अभी हमने करंट एग्जांपल में देखा, रीसेंट एग्जांपल में देखा कि अगर कोई गवर्नमेंट अपनी ऑफिस बिल्डिंग को बेचती है और उससे जो पैसे आ रहे हैं, उससे जो मनी आ रही है, प्रोसीड्स आ रही है, उसको यूज करती है टू फाइनेंस डेट, तो क्या होगा? तो कैपिटल एसेट्स में तो कमी वाक़या होगी ना. तो अंडर द करंट सिस्टम क्या होगा कि डेफिसिट वुड फॉल, बट अंडर कैपिटल बजटिंग डेफिसिट वुड रिमेन अनचेंज बिकॉज फॉल इन डेट, जब डेट में कमी वाक़या हुई क्योंकि आपने फाइनेंस किया उस डेट को थ्रू जो आपको पैसे आए बाय सेलिंग द बिल्डिंग. तो जब उस डेट में कमी वाक़ई हुई तो उससे क्या हुआ, एसेट्स में भी कमी वाक़ई हुई, क्योंकि आपने बिल्डिंग बेच दी। जब एसेट्स में कमी वाक़ई हुई एक तरफ से, दूसरी तरफ से डेट में कमी वाक़ई हुई, तो क्या हो गया, चेंज इन डेट माइनस चेंज इन एसेट इज द डेफिसिट। तो दोनों में जब तब्दीली हुई, दोनों में कमी वाक़ई हुई, तो ओवरऑल डेफिसिट विल रिमेन अनचेंज्ड, तो डेफिसिट में तब्दीली नहीं आएगी। बट अंडर द करंट सिस्टम जब ऐसा करेंगे आप तो डेफिसिट कम हो जाएगा। तो राइट, सो कैपिटल एसेट को कंसीडर करना, द एसेट्स को कंसीडर करना while measuring deficit in the economy is an important parameter, is an important variable. Third problem, which is in the measurement of inflation, which we encountered in measuring deficit in different economies, is the uncounted liabilities. So when we calculate deficits of the economies of the countries, we miss the uncounted liabilities, which are the part of government expenditures, which are borne by the governments, right? जो government बर्दाश्त करती है, government खर्च करती है, उनको हम count नहीं करते। अगर हम उनको count कर लें तो actual जो figure है, actual जो state of affair है deficit का, वो एक different होगा। Now what are those liabilities? उनकी हम बात करते हैं स्लाइड में। करंट मेजर ऑफ डेफिसिट ओमिट्स इंपॉर्टेंट लाइबिलिटीज ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट। जो करंट मेजर जिसकी हमने बात की, जिसमें हमने कहा कि क्यूमुलेटेड डेफिसिट क्यूमुलेटेड डेट ओवर द टाइम पीरियड बेसिकली इज द डेट, के मुख्तलिफ टाइमिंग्स में जो डेट में इजाफा होता जाता है उसको हम डेफिसिट का नाम देते हैं। सो दैट इज द करंट मेजर जिसकी हम अब बात करें। बट दिस करंट मेजर ऑफ डेफिसिट omits important liabilities of the government। बहुत सारी ऐसी important liabilities हैं जो गवर्नमेंट को करनी पड़ती हैं और उसको इस मेजर में शामिल नहीं किया गया, तो जिससे हम कह सकते हैं कि the calculated deficit is not properly measured। What are those? For example, future pension payments on to the current government workers, right? तो फ्यूचर में जिन लोगों को पेमेंट्स करनी है, पेंशन देनी है, जो करंटली काम कर रहे हैं, तो उसका कुछ ना कुछ पैसा गवर्नमेंट को रखना पड़ता है उस अकाउंट में, उस हेड में, तो इसको शामिल नहीं किया जाता। दिस इज वन ऑफ द लायबिलिटी ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट। सेकंड, फ्यूचर सोशल सिक्योरिटी पेमेंट्स। अब फ्यूचर में जो सोशल सिक्योरिटी पेमेंट्स करनी है आपने उन लोगों को जो उस वक्त काम नहीं कर रहे हैं, अभी तो वो काम कर रहे हैं, बट यू नीड टू पे देम इन फ्यूचर व्हेन दे आर लेड ऑफ, व्हेन दे आर नॉट वर्किंग, व्हेन दे आर रिटायर्ड, राइट, व्हेन दे आर अनएम्प्लॉयड। तो वो सोशल सिक्योरिटी जो पेमेंट्स करनी है, दैट इज आल्सो वन ऑफ द लायबिलिटीज ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट, राइट, दैट नीड टू बी counted, that need to be included while you are measuring deficit for the economy। तो उसको भी शामिल करना चाहिए। कंटीजेंट लाइबिलिटीज भी ऐसी कुछ होती हैं जो कि गवर्नमेंट की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज में आती है और उसको हमें शामिल करना चाहिए डेफिसिट निकालते वक्त। दो हार्ड टू अटैच वैल्यू विद द आउटकम इज एज अनसर्टन, बट दीज नीड टू बी कंटीजेंट लाइबिलिटीज भी होती हैं कि सडन जो चेंजेस आती हैं, जैसे अगर पाकिस्तान की बात करें, सो देयर वाज ए फ्लड, देयर वाज earthquake, right? तो इस तरह की जो चीज़ तब्दीली आती है, तो गवर्नमेंट हैज़ द लायबिलिटीज टू ओवरकम दैट सिचुएशन। तो उसमें अखराजात होते हैं, खर्चे होते हैं, दैट नीड टू बी इंक्लूडेड इन द कैलकुलेशन और द मेजरमेंट ऑफ डेफिसिट। सो अनकाउंटेड लायबिलिटीज इज वन ऑफ द प्रॉब्लम, is one issue that needs to be considered while measuring deficit for the economy, is measuring deficit in the economy. That needs to be included, that need to be considered. If we consider that, then the figure, then the calculated deficit would be different than the actual. The fourth problem in measuring deficit is the business cycle. The deficit varies over time, right? The deficit changes over time, over the business cycle, due to automatic stabilizer, because there are automatic stabilizer in the economy. Due to those stabilizers, deficits keeps on changing over the business cycles. Like If we talk, what are those automatic stabilizers? Unemployment insurance, the income tax systems. So these are the automatic stabilizer, and this keeps changing the business environment, business cycle, and that keeps changing the deficit in the country and the economy. These are not measurement errors, but do make it harder to judge fiscal policy stance. But these are not the actual measurement errors. आप इनको नहीं कह सकते, but you can't ignore them also, but it is difficult to judge the fiscal policy stance. For example, is an observed increase in deficit due to downturn or expansionary shift in fiscal policy? Whether the observed जो increase इजाफा हुआ है budget deficit में, that is due to a downturn, means contractionary or expansionary shift in fiscal policy. That is due to downturn or expansionary fiscal policy or not? These are important questions. Solution. What is the solution then? Cyclical adjustment budget deficit. You need to adjust the budget deficit in each cycle, right? Like if we talk about full employment deficit, that is known as the full employment deficit. If we keep adjusting the cyclical adjustment, and so it is based on estimates of what government spendings and revenues would be if economy were at the natural rate of output and employment. Agar how we can do that? It is based on the figures, on the government estimates on spending and revenue. It is based on the estimates of government, what government spending and revenue would be. Government के क्या खर्चात थे, government के क्या revenue था जब economy अपने full employment level पे थी, full output level was at natural, right? So that is the solution to correctly measure the deficit when we talk about business cycle. So business cycle basically is one of the problem in measurement of deficit. So what is the bottom line? What is the result? What is the conclusion? The bottom line is that we must exercise care when interpreting the reported deficit figures. तो जब आप deficit की बात करते हैं, जब आप budget deficit की बात करते हैं, जब उसके बारे में जिक्र हो रहा हो, discussions हो रही हूँ, तो you should be very carefully interpret those figures, because you are not accounted for, you are not accounting all of the problems that we've discussed now, right? So maybe you are omitting some of the problems, some of the issue, important things that needs to be considered, that needs to be included while calculating the budget deficit. So the bottom line, the suggestion for you, for the economists, for the experts, is that we must exercise with care when interpreting the deficit figure, reported deficit figures, because of those problems that we discussed now. Now we'll talk about, is the government debt really a problem? Really government debt is a problem? There are two points of view about this, that one is the traditional view, the other is Ricardian view. So दो views की हम बात करेंगे, जिसके बाद हमें अंदाज़ा होगा कि क्या वाकई ही डेट जो है, गवर्नमेंट डेट जो एक इशू है, एक प्रॉब्लम है किसी मुल्क के लिए. इसके लिए हमें दो पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू विच इज़ गिवन बाय डिफरेंट ग्रुप ऑफ इकोनॉमिस्ट. वन इज़ द ट्रेडिशनल व्यू, द अदर इज़ रिकार्डियन व्यू. तो उनके बाद हम ये कह सकते हैं कि इन्फ्लेशन जो है उस मुल्क के लिए मसला है या नहीं है. द ट्रेडिशनल व्यू ऑफ ए टैक्स कट and corresponding increase in government debt. So when there is a tax cut in the economy, जब टैक्स में कमी वाक़ई होती है तो what happens कि उससे रेवेन्यू में कमी होती है, दूसरी साइड पे एक्सपेंडिचर में इजाफा हो रहा होता है. जब रेवेन्यू में कमी होगी, एक्सपेंडिचर में इजाफा होगा, तो क्या होगा, उससे गवर्नमेंट के डेट में इजाफा होना शुरू हो जाता है. द गवर्नमेंट डेट स्टार्ट इंक्रीजिंग. नाउ व्हाट इज द ट्रेडिशनल व्यू? What the traditional economists say about this, and then we'll see that what the Ricardian group of economists says that about the tax cut and corresponding and corresponding increase in government debt, right? So then we come up with the suggestion with the final conclusion, okay, whether we can say that the government debt is really a problem for the countries, for the economies, or not. Suppose if we talk about short run, so when there is a tax cut, this will bring a change in the level of output. This will bring a change in the level of unemployment in the country, in the economy. जब टैक्स में कमी वाक़ होगी तो व्हाट विल हैपन, रेवेन्यू में कमी वाक़ होगी, स्पेंडिंग में कमी वाक़, जब टैक्स में कमी वाक़ होगी तो जो इंडिविजुअल स्पेंडिंग है उसमें इजाफा हो जाएगा. जब स्पेंडिंग में इजाफा होगा, what will happen? There is incentive for the producer, there is increase in the demand for goods and services. जब goods and services की डिमांड बढ़ जाएगी तो this is the traditional view of tax cut. जब goods and services की डिमांड बढ़ेगी तो there will be an incentive for the producer to produce more, to supply more. तो आउटपुट में इजाफा होगा, आउटपुट में इजाफा होगा, they will hire more worker, तो अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट में कमी वाक़ होगी, राइट. सो in the short run what will happen due to tax cut, there will be change in the level of output. The output level will increase because of the stimulation of the expenses, and unemployment will go down. What will happen in the long run? According to traditional view, Y and U back at their natural rates, right? So in the long run, जब एग्रीगेट डिमांड में इजाफा हुआ उससे आउटपुट, तो सप्लाई में, एग्रीगेट सप्लाई में इजाफा हुआ तो इकोनॉमी जो है लॉन्ग रन में दोबारा वापस आ जाएगी एट इट्स नेचुरल लेवल ऑफ आउटपुट एंड नेचुरल और फुल एम्प्लॉयमेंट लेवल, राइट. सो इफ वी टॉक अबाउट द क्लोज्ड इकोनॉमी, देन ऑफ कोर्स जब उसमें एक्सपेंडिचर में इजाफा होगा तो सेविंग में कमी वाक़ होगी. जब सेविंग में कमी वाक़ होगी तो लॉन्ग रन में क्या होगा, सेविंग में कमी वाक़ होगी तो इंटरेस्ट रेट में इजाफा होगा. जब इंटरेस्ट रेट में इजाफा होगा तो इन्वेस्टमेंट में कमी वाक़ हो जाएगी, राइट. सो हम बेसिकली ज़हन में रखें कि हम ट्रेडिशनल व्यू की बात करें. अब ट्रेडिशनल व्यू में हम तीन चीज़ें डिस्कस करेंगे कि ट्रेडिशनल इकोनॉमिस्ट क्या कहते हैं कि जब टैक्स कट होगा इकोनॉमी में, जब टैक्सेस में कमी वाक़ होगी तो गवर्नमेंट डेट में इजाफा होगा, राइट. जब डेट में इजाफा होगा तो हाउ द ट्रेडिशनल इकोनॉमिस्ट थिंक अबाउट दैट टैक्स कट. वो ये कहते हैं कि शॉर्ट रन में अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट और आउटपुट में तब्दीली आएगी, जिससे क्या होगा, लॉन्ग रन में आउटपुट और एम्प्लॉयमेंट दोबारा वापस अपने नेचुरल लेवल पे आ जाएंगे. इफ़ वी टॉक अबाउट क्लोज्ड इकोनॉमी, तो जब एक्सपेंडिचर में इजाफा होगा तो सेविंग्स में क्या होगी. हमने ये कहा कि जब टैक्स कट होगा, टैक्स में कमी वाक़ होगी तो एक्सपेंडिचर में इजाफा हो जाएगा, स्पेंडिंग में इजाफा हो जाएगा. जब स्पेंडिंग में इजाफा हो जाएगा तो प्राइवेट सेविंग कम हो जाएगी. जब प्राइवेट सेविंग कम होगी तो ओवरऑल नेशनल सेविंग में कमी वाक़ होगी. जब नेशनल सेविंग में कमी वाक़ होगी तो रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट में इजाफा हो जाएगा. जब रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट में इजाफा होगा तो इन्वेस्टमेंट में कमी वाक़ होगी. जब इन्वेस्टमेंट में कमी वाक़ होगी तो आउटपुट लेवल में कमी वाक़ हो जाएगी. इफ़ वी टॉक अबाउट क्लोज्ड इकोनॉमी, अगेन हम अब क्या करते हैं, विल टॉक अबाउट ओपन इकोनॉमी एंड सी what will happen, what will be the effect of tax cut in case of open economy. And again keep in mind this is the view, these are the views of traditional economists, or the traditional view of tax cut. ओपन इकोनॉमी की जब हम बात करते हैं तो ओपन इकोनॉमी में हम विल टॉक अबाउट एक्सपोर्ट्स एंड इंपोर्ट्स, वी टॉक अबाउट नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स, वी टॉक अबाउट एक्सचेंज रेट, राइट. जब एक्सचेंज रेट क्या होगा, एक्सचेंज रेट आपका डॉलर अप्रिशिएट कर जाएगा. आप डॉलर अप्रिशिएट करेगा तो क्या होगा, जो लोकल मार्केट में चीज़ें हैं वो सस्ती हो जाएंगी, बट थिंग्स विल बी एक्सपेंसिव फॉर द इम्पोर्टेंस, राइट. आपकी एक्सपोर्ट्स महंगी हो जाएंगी. जब एक्सपोर्ट महंगी होगी नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स में कमी वाक़ होगी. तो हायर, जब नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स में कमी वाक़ होगी तो ट्रेड बैलेंस विल बी इन डेफिसिट. तो हायर, देयर विल बी हायर ट्रेड डेफिसिट, राइट, इन केस ऑफ द टैक्स कट इन द इकोनॉमी. सो what will happen in the very long run, उससे भी लॉन्ग रन अगर की बात करें, एक तो हमने अभी तो हमने बात की लॉन्ग रन में, अगर हम उससे भी लंबे अरसे की बात करते हैं, उससे भी ज्यादा अरसे की बात करते हैं तो क्या होगा, स्लो ग्रोथ until economy reaches to new steady state with lower income per capita, right. तो what will happen in the very long run, इस टैक्स कट का इफेक्ट क्या होगा एक लंबे अरसे में इकोनॉमी पे. अकॉर्डिंग टू ट्रेडिशनल व्यू, there will be slow growth until the economy reaches to the steady state with lower per capita income, राइट, तो ओवरऑल जो ग्रोथ है उसमें कमी वाक़ हो जाएगी. तो दिस इज व्हाट will be the effect of tax cut as far as traditional economists are concerned, and we have discussed what will happen to the economy both in the short run and in the long run. Now what Ricardian says about this tax cut policy and how the tax cut affects the debt level of output employment in the economy. Due to David Ricardo in 1820, more recently advanced by Robert Barrow, so they said that they have given, according to the Ricardian Equivalence theory, they said that a debt finance tax cut, if you want to finance debt and by cutting taxes, has no effect on consumption, national savings, the interest rate, investment, net exports, real GDP even in the short run. वो ये कहते हैं, their research shows that they are saying that, जैसा कि हमने कहा, ट्रेडिशनल इकोनॉमिस्ट ये कहते हैं कि अगर आप टैक्स करते हैं, टैक्स को कमी करते हैं, टैक्स में कमी से एक्सपेंडिचर में तब्दीली आती है. ट्रेडिशनल इकोनॉमिस्ट ये कहते हैं उससे एग्रीगेट डिमांड, एग्रीगेट सप्लाई तब्दील होगी, आउटपुट में तब्दीली आएगी, एम्प्लॉयमेंट में तब्दीली आएगी, इन्वेस्टमेंट में तब्दीली आएगी, एक्सपोर्ट्स में तब्दीली आएगी, interest rate में तब्दीली आएगी. But what these Ricardian economists or Ricardian says about this, about that tax cut, they says that a debt finance tax cut has no effect on consumption, no effect on national savings, no effect on the real interest rate in the economy. And then if there is no interest rate effect on the real interest rate, there will be no effect on the investment, no effect on net exports or real GDP, even in the short run. वहाँ तो हमने लॉन्ग रन की बात की थी ना कि वहाँ पे इफेक्ट होगा, but not even in the short run. What is the logic? Why? What is the reason why they say this, that the tax cut has no effect on any parameter in the macroeconomics in the economy? They say that consumers are forward looking. They know that a debt finance tax cut today implies an increase in future taxes. उनको पता है, they are forward looking, कि अगर गवर्नमेंट ने अभी टैक्स को कमी वाक़ की है, they want to finance deficit, they want to finance debt, right? उसको टैक्स, उसकी वजह से टैक्स को कम किया. But what will happen? जब वो डेट में इजाफा हो जाएगा तो फ्यूचर में टैक्सेस में गवर्नमेंट इजाफा करेगी in future. That is equal in present value of the tax cut. So जब फ्यूचर में टैक्सेस में इजाफा होगा तो क्या होगा, उनको उनकी कंजम्पशन में कमी वाक़ होगी. सो दे आर फॉरवर्ड लुकिंग, दे बिलीव दैट कि अगर अभी टैक्सेस में कमी वाक़ हुई है तो व्हाट विल हैपन इन फ्यूचर, दे विल रेज द टैक्सेस टू फाइनेंस दैट डेट. सो thus this tax cut does not make consumers better off now, and so they do not raise consumption. तो अभी currently at present जो टैक्स में कमी वाक़ हुई है उससे कंज्यूमर बेटर ऑफ नहीं होंगे, क्योंकि फ्यूचर में उनको वो पे करना पड़ेगा in the form of high taxes. So they will not raise their consumption at present. So this is the logic behind the Ricardian view about consumption, about income, about investment, about trade, about everything, right? So they said that this tax cut does not make consumer better off because they do not raise their consumption at present, because they know in future the government is again going to raise taxes to finance that debt which was increased due to tax cut. So they save the full tax cut in order to repay the future tax liability. तो वो क्या करेंगे, जितना पैसा टैक्स कट की वजह से इजाफा हुआ है उनकी इनकम में, वो उसको सेव कर लेंगे. They will save that money and then future they will use that money, they will use that saving to repay the higher taxes or the tax liability when the government again will raise their taxes to finance the debt that was due to the decrease in tax cut. So what is the result? जब ये होगा, private saving rises by the amount public saving falls, so leaving national saving unchanged, right? तो प्राइवेट सेविंग में इजाफा होगा, क्योंकि हमने ये कहा है कि जब टैक्सेस में कमी होती है तो क्या होगा, नेशनल सेविंग्स में भी कमी वाक़ हो जाती है. तो जब हम ये कह रहे हैं कि उससे कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ेगा, वो जो इजाफा होगा इनकम में वो सेव कर लेते हैं, तो प्राइवेट सेविंग में इजाफा होगा, दैट इज़ इक्वल टू द फॉल इन नेशनल सेविंग। जब प्राइवेट सेविंग में इजाफा होगा, नेशनल सेविंग में कमी होगी, दोनों उसको ऑफसेट कर जाएंगे। ओवरऑल नेशनल सेविंग विल रिमेन अनचेंज अकॉर्डिंग टू रिकॉर्डियन इक्विवेलेंस हाइपोथेसिस। So what are the problems associated with Ricardian equivalence? Myopia. No, first problem is myopia. Not all consumers think that they are fast ahead, so they see the tax cut as a windfall. So बहुत सारे जो कंज्यूमर होते हैं सारे के सारे फॉरवर्ड लुकिंग नहीं होते, आगे का नहीं सोच रहे होते, फ्यूचर के बारे में इतना ख्याल नहीं करते, they are not very much worried about future, so they see that the tax cut as a windfall. So borrowing constraint. Some consumers are not able to borrow enough to achieve their optimal consumption, so and would therefore spend a tax cut. So बहुत सारे लोग जो ऐसे होते हैं जिनमें capabilities, जिनमें ये they are not in a position to borrow to achieve their full optimal consumption. अपनी consumption को smooth चलाने के लिए वो borrowing नहीं कर सकते, तो फिर क्या करेंगे? जो tax cut से उनकी income में तब्दीली आई है उसको इस्तेमाल करेंगे to achieve optimal consumption. Future generations is another problems. If consumer expect that the burden of repaying taxes cut will fall on the future generation, then a tax cut now makes them feel better off, so they increase spending. So this is another problem. So अगर हम वो समझते हैं कि फ्यूचर में उसकी वजह से burden हो जाएगा of repaying taxes, so and now a tax cut will fall on future generation, then a tax cut now will make them better off, so they increase their spending at the moment, at current consumption बढ़ा देंगे अपनी. Now some other evidence against Ricardian equivalence. In early 1980s, huge Reagan tax cut caused deficit to rise. National saving में कमी हो गई, real interest rate में इजाफा हो गया, the exchange rate appreciated and net export fell down. In 1992, President George H.W. Bush reduced income tax withholding to stimulate the economy. This merely delayed taxes but did not make consumer better off. These are some of the evidence against the Ricardian equivalence. Yet almost half of the consumer used part of this extra take-home pay for their consumption. Proponents of Ricardian equivalence argue that the Reagan tax cut did not provide a fair test of Ricardian equivalence. They say that consumer may have expected the debt to be repaid in future spending cuts instead of future tax hikes. So this is what the proponents are saying. Private saving may have fallen for reasons other than tax cut, such as optimism about the economy, because the data is subject to different interpretations. Both of the views of government debt survive, right? So both of the view about the government debt, जिसकी हमने बात की Ricardian view की और traditional view की, दोनों survive करते हैं because the interpretation, जब आप data को analyze करते हैं तो everybody, different group, different economists have their own interpretation. So we'll talk about, so after discussing these two views about the government debt, one is the traditional view and other is Ricardian view, कुछ और perspective की बात करते हैं. We'll discuss the debt, government debt in some other perspective, and what are those? Balanced budgets versus optimal fiscal policy. Some politicians have proposed amending the US Constitution to require balanced federal budget every year. Many economists reject this proposal, arguing that the deficit should be used to stabilize output and employment. It can also be used to smooth taxes in the face of fluctuating income. It also helps to redistribute income across generation when and whenever appropriates. Right? This was the first perspective. Second, fiscal effects on monetary policy. government deficits may be financed by printing money, right? If there is a budget deficit in the government, most of the government क्या करती है कि they can finance that debt by printing money. So what will happen then? A high government debt may be incentive for policymaker to create inflation. So then if there is a high deficit, high budget, high debt in the economies, so that basically helps or provide incentive to the policymaker to create inflation, to reduce the real value of debt at the expense of bond holders in the economy. Fortunately, there is a little evidence that the link between fiscal and monetary policy is important. तो इस पे अभी बहुत कम रिसर्च हुई है. There is a little evidence, almost no evidence, which can help us to provide that the link between monetary and fiscal policy is important. Most of the government know the folly of creating inflation. Most central banks have at least some political independence from fiscal policy makers. So in most of the countries, the central banks हैं वो independent हैं, they are independent than the central bank, than the fiscal policy. वो अलहदा से अपना action करते हैं, fiscal policy अलहदा से अपना action करती है. The third is about debt and politics. Fiscal policy is not made by angels. That is made by the policy makers. As we studied, it is given by Mankiv at page 424. Right? So some do not trust policy makers with deficit spending. They argue that policy makers do not worry about the true cost of their spending, since the burden falls on future taxpayer. Right? So the policy makers हैं वो इस बारे में बिल्कुल bother नहीं करते कि what is going to happen to the future generation. So future taxpayer cannot participate in the decision making process, and their interests may not be taken into account. तो वो ये कहते हैं कि future generation का ख्याल नहीं रखा जाता और they are not taken into consideration when decisions are made by the policy makers, especially the fiscal policy. So this is another reason for the proposal for a balanced budget amendment discussed above. So this is a reason you can say that that the government want to launch a balanced budget in US economy. Fourth, international dimensions. Government budget deficit can lead to trade deficit. जब government का budget deficit होता है तो what will happen if we talk about international economy? Then their trade balance is in deficit, which must be financed by borrowing from abroad. Right? So large government debt may increase the risk of capital flight. तो अगर debt बढ़ता जाएगा तो that helps or that increase the risk of capital flight, as a foreign investor may perceive a greater risk of default to making investment. Right? So large debt may reduce a country political clout in the international affairs. So large debt may reduce or can reduce a country political clout in the international market and the international affairs. So we can say that debt is not a good for the economy, is a problem for the economies. So this was all about today. So we try to learn about the debt, how we can see what are the problems measuring debt or deficit in the economy. We have also seen that whether debt is a really problem or not, उसके बारे में हमने 2-3 views की बात की, कुछ और perspective की बात की. Now I will try to summarize in 5 minutes what we have learned today about the debt or the government debt in this lecture. So we talked about the relative to GDP, the US government debt is moderate compared to the other countries. तो first हमने जो देखा, हमने compare किया US debt GDP ratio को with the other countries and find it is a moderate as compared to most of the other countries. Second, standard figures on deficits are imperfect measures of fiscal policy because they are not corrected for inflation. They do not account for changes in government assets. They do not so standard figures जो deficits की होती हैं are the imperfect measure of fiscal policy. जो आप deficit measure करते हैं वो इतना properly perfect नहीं होता. तो हमने problems discuss किए. There are certain problems which are very important for the measurement of deficit. कौन कौन से problem है कि वो जो डेफिसिट आप निकालते हैं दैट इज नॉट एडजस्टेड फॉर इन्फ्लेशन, नॉट करेक्टेड फॉर इन्फ्लेशन। दूसरा प्रॉब्लम हमने क्या डिस्कस किया, डू नॉट अकाउंट फॉर द कैपिटल एसेट्स और द चेंज इन गवर्नमेंट एसेट्स इन दैट केस। थर्ड, बहुत सारी चीज़ें, वी हैव omitted some liabilities like future pension payment to the current workers. That is one of the liability that needs to be included while calculating deficits for the economy. Another problem which is very important for measuring the inflation is that we do not account for effects of business cycle when we calculate deficit. So these are the four problems which basically are important to get the perfect figures about the deficit. If we want perfect figure, we must consider these issues, these problems to calculate, to measure deficit in the economies. उसके बाद हमने बात की कि whether or not that is a problem for the governments, for the countries, for the economies or not. So we talked about two views specifically. One, the traditional view. The other, we talked about the Ricardian Equivalence hypothesis. In the traditional view, a debt finance tax cut increase consumption, reduce national saving. In a closed economy, this leads to higher interest rate, lower investment, and lower long run standard of living of the individuals. In an open economy, it causes an exchange rate appreciation, fall in net exports, or increase in trade deficit. So this was the traditional view of tax cut, and that tax cut is in the objective, in the line to finance the debt, right? When the government want to finance the debt and they want to tax cut, so what will happen and what traditional economists say, this is all about that. Now the Ricardian view holds that debt finance tax cut do not affect consumption, do not affect savings, do not affect interest rate, and do not affect income or net exports in the country. Most economists oppose a strict balanced budget rule as it would hinder the use of fiscal policy to stabilize output, employment, smooth taxes, or redistribute the tax burden across generation. Government debt can have other effects. If the government debt accumulates, become large, it has some other effects. उसकी आज हमने बात की क्या? It may lead to inflation. It may, the politician can shift burden of taxes from current to future generation, may reduce countries' political clout in the international affairs, or scarce foreign investors into pulling their capital out of the country. So these are some other effects of debt on other effects of government debts on different parameters. So this was all about today. I stop my lecture here today. Thank you so much for giving me a patience hearing, for hearing me for hearing this lecture. Till next time we meet, God bless you. Allah Hafiz.